Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey.
Good morning. I'm Marty Benson sitting in for Jeannie Pete today. Welcome to Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey. This morning we're joined by Wayman Parks, who is the Community Relations Director with Peregrine's Landing at Emory Heights here in Atlanta. Welcome, Wayman.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You know, Wayman, as I looked at the website, I'm really excited to talk today about senior housing and what's been happening with senior housing. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the senior housing industry.
Well, actually, my grandmother, who is the biggest influence in my life, as I kind of went through my own family struggles with her, she was my greatest mentor, pretty much really shaped me to be who I am today. As her memory started dissipating, and our family was looking at options in terms of what we could do, and her not wanting to leave home, we knew we couldn't take care of her at home. She didn't want that. So that's kind of what drove me to help other families make that decision in terms of how to deal with the guilt versus what really is better for the senior in your life.
Terrific. I think always, especially people that work in the healthcare industry, that personal experience really drives us, to doing what we do and that commitment. How long have you been in the senior housing industry?
Probably about 15 years now.
All right.
I hope I don't look it, but yeah, about 15 years.
Not at all. Not at all. Well, so with that experience, you've seen a lot of changes in our industry, and really today we sort of focus on two topics because I think they're very interrelated, as we'll talk about today. One, obviously, is housing and finding good, safe, comfortable housing for our seniors, but also I think the issue of dementia, in terms of what you've touched on, which is really, in this area and in this country, kind of a growing epidemic that people really aren't aware of. And I know in prior weeks we've had Dr. Fagel on our show, and he talked in detail about what happens to people that have the dementia diagnosis. In fact, there's somewhere around 44 million people, worldwide with
right.
dementia. So with that, in terms of, the housing that you're managing with Peregrines, tell us a little bit about what you feel makes it different.
I think for Peregrine, our niche is memory care. So that's pretty much all we do. We serve seniors who have cognitive impairments of many sorts, whether it's some form of dementia or Alzheimer's at various stages. So that's our niche. We have an absolutely 180 degree turn approach from the institutional model of keeping folks, safe, well-fed. We really gear everything we do toward stimulating long-term memory. Because as you know, dementia really destroys short-term memory, and so that's what we think causes a lot of frustration, behaviors, aggravation with folks, trying to communicate with their loved ones. So since the long-term memory is intact, everything we do is geared towards stimulating long-term memory.
And that's really interesting. So basically, because people are so impacted with their short-term memory, what type of activities or things are you trying to do to really stimulate that long-term memory?
Yeah. That our programming is called the Peregrine Way. That really is what separates us, I think, from most people in the industry. Stephen Bowman, who's the president of our company, has really done a fantastic job of really going outside of the box, being innovative in terms of that. So in our communities, you might see potbelly pig. We have the only potbelly pig in the country. In our communities, you might see chickens. So we have our sister community in Vinings as well as us. We have the only chickens that you'll see in the memory care community. And those things are not done because they're cute or because Stephen says yes when other people don't. They're actually done because most of our seniors are raised on farms. Everybody's held a bunny rabbit. Everybody's had a pet, and so what we do in that is we allow them to go back to a place where their memory is more vibrant, thereby engaging them on a better level than just what did you have for breakfast.
That's great. So does a pig have a name?
Yeah. We even have a gecko. So there's really no limits to some of our communities might look like a zoo.
Right.
So there's really no limits to what we will or won't do if it's relevant to engage in long-term memory.
No, that's terrific. And one of the things I noticed when I was touring one of your facilities, I love the old pictures. I love the pictures of the residents, what they looked like when they were younger, what they wore, and obviously, with this age group we're dealing with, so many of the veterans, and we get involved in honoring them as well, and that's things that we can do together. But I really like that. So is that part of the philosophy then, as people kind of see what they were and how things were, that it sort of provides some comfort and quality of life?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we offer in our communities is the genealogy room. And in the genealogy room, you've kind of heard of the Ancestry.com and that piece. But what we do is we're able to then research for our residents, their grandmother, and someone who they may have had an interaction with when they were 10, 15, 18 years old that, quite frankly, nobody's talking about anymore. But if we're able to research that, pull up those pictures, that you can look at when your grandmother may have babysitted you, or maybe taking you to your prom or something like that, and that again stimulates long-term memory and allows us to have some really meaningful dialogue and engagement.
I think that's terrific. Tell us a little bit about the difference in terms of facilities for our listeners as they're looking at and evaluating different facilities. This term memory care, what's sort of the difference between a facility that would have memory care just versus a regular assisted living or personal care home?
Yeah, in memory care, again, it pretty much boils down to the training. And again, in assisted living, folks are more independent. They're more able to, dress themselves, bathe themselves, toilet themselves, things of that nature. But in memory care, you may have someone who can do those things, but just maybe does not remember to do those things, or does not remember when they have to do those things. So in memory care, it's about training, and for us, it's not 40 hours in front of a computer. It's ongoing training, weekly in-services, and sometimes those just boil down to even one caregiver talking about how their success story with getting Mr. Smith to finally get in a shower when nobody else has been able to do it. So it's really how do you deal with or help or assist someone who can't tell you what they had for breakfast. So that's really the difference between assisted living and in memory care.
Okay. And is that a tough judgment sometimes? Because when you look at dementia, and again, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when Dr. Fagel was on, you've got 7 stages that sort of define dementia or the decline with dementia, starting with stage 1 where there's really no impairment, but as you sort of go down that line and you get to stage 7, which is very severe, where are you sort of on that spectrum in terms of being able to qualify to be in the memory care side? How severe?
It really all across the spectrum, to be honest. It really depends on what circumstances brings a person to want a family to want to look and see whether it's someone who went out for a drive. Okay. We have folks who were actually driving when they came to us, but just couldn't remember where they were going.
Okay.
So it could be someone very early who's pretty independent, to someone who's a danger to themselves or others because they started cooking and forgot to turn off the stove.
Okay.
So really, it just depends on the individual circumstance when a family feels that my loved one is a danger to themselves or maybe to other people.
Gotcha. Okay. And I thought as you were talking about your corporate vision that the other 2 principles that I read about were really interesting. Tell us about, in terms of when you talk about treating the family, what does that really mean?
Yeah, we Peregrine is really big. Stephen says we look at ourselves as a 3-legged stool. Residents, families, and staff. When someone considers moving into one of our communities, we are very engaged in the family. We know this is folks who are in crisis, who don't know what to do, feel with guilt. So we want to know their hopes, their fears, how to help them on their journey. So we want to help them have better visits. We don't want to take from them what they do and what they mean in their loved ones' lives. We just want to be a part of it. And again, that's in service for them, training for them, support groups for them so that they're empowered and they can get back to the relationship that they've had with their loved ones. And we just kind of assist with the care for that.
Okay, terrific. I know sometimes, we see in the healthcare field that the actual, in your case, the resident, in our case, the patient, is really dealing much more with reality of their situation and their challenges, whereas the family is more in denial and more struggling with changes in that person's condition or how they were. So I think it's great that one of your core principles is treating the family. That, to me, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of the staff training, I know that's your third principle. Tell us about the training of the staff. What are the types of things that you have to do with the staff in that environment for them to understand how to deal with some of the challenging residents?
We do ongoing dementia training because, as you said, there's 7 stages of dementia. So it really makes sense for us to make sure that our staff knows what those 7 stages are. You know, how people may respond or react to certain things in various stages, and how best to engage them. One of the things, coincidentally, that we're even doing with Homestead is virtual dementia training. And so we are making sure that that's available, via Homestead, which we appreciate, to all of our staff, so that they know what it's actually like for our residents. What's the day like for someone with dementia, who's trying to communicate and there's an obvious breakdown. So the better they can understand that, the more compassion they have, the more patience they have, and the more willing they are, to treat those residents with love and respect.
Yeah, no, I think that's terrific. And really the word that comes out to me is empathy, because I think that's really what it takes to be able to successfully take care of the kind of residents that you're dealing with, especially on the memory care side. And in fact, you mentioned about the virtual dementia tour. I think it's a phenomenal experience. I've been able to go through it and become certified, as well as many of our staff. And Georgia Public TV 2 nights ago had a special on dementia. And in fact, they were talking about what you were talking about with the virtual dementia tour, and how, and now actually we're doing it and offering it to families as well to go through the experience, because once you're able to spend that 20 minutes, kind of living as a dementia patient, which is what this experience does, you come out of it and people have all different reactions. Some people cry, some people, don't know what to do, but they have a better understanding that sometimes people might act out that have a dementia diagnosis, and they're not meaning to. They're still there. They're acting out because of the symptoms of the disease.
Absolutely.
So if we understand that much better, that it's not that they're that their personalities changed, or that they're just having a bad day. They
absolutely
they're sick. And
makes all the difference.
We need to be here to help them. So really happy you're taking advantage of that particular resource. Anything else education-wise, or any other resources that you could recommend to our audience that might help them get a better understanding of, your challenges with these residents?
Yeah, I think, oftentimes we encourage people to come in and volunteer, be a part of our activities. Oftentimes when people think of activities in a setting like ours, the first thing pops in your mind is bingo. And that's probably one of the only things we don't do. Is bingo. But I think sometimes when people, as opposed to just waiting till something affects your family, or affects, your loved one, just, giving 30 minutes or an hour a week, not even a day, but a week, to a place that always can use an extra hand, always can use, extra set of eyes, then that will allow folks to understand, hey, these folks that we serve are people who have made significant contributions to this world we live in, and they still deserve the same respect and dignity that we all want. So I think sometimes just the exposure to it. We have a lot of intergenerational programs where we have high school kids come in, and I think sometimes that affects the relationships they have with their grandparents, who may not be in a community, but just having the empathy for someone who, really is so appreciative of just, 5 or 10 minutes that you spend with them, talking to them, whether you understand them or not, the fact that they have your undivided attention. So I think that's a phenomenal way to get involved, and for folks to really kind of see the value in what we do every day.
No, that's phenomenal, and I think both of our companies are really committed to quality of life. And
absolutely.
I wanted to chuckle when you mentioned about the bingo. I've seen some of these bingo games deteriorated to some pretty competitive situations. People, don't interrupt the bingo game, because people do not want to lose at that. So,
absolutely not.
But it is, I think, working in healthcare services, it is an opportunity for volunteerism, and that's a lot of what we all need in the healthcare field to help provide that quality of life. So it is an opportunity for young people to get involved and in some cases build relationships within their own family. We certainly we certainly need that to ensure that our residents are happy and satisfied with their living environment. So, is there any one family success story that you can think of that really sort of warms your heart? Maybe one of the residents that you've had in the either now or in the past, where you've been able to impact their quality of life, or maybe they kind of came in reluctantly, but then over the course of time you were able to.
There's about 1 million of those, but one that really means a lot to me is when I started with Peregrine and started out in the Decatur community. There was a lady there, we call her Miss Joyce. And Miss Joyce, she walks all day. She walks and drinks water, and she taught high school Spanish at Tucker High School for 28 years. And Miss Joyce, on a regular basis, her communication might be considered gibberish or, not something that people can understand. So one of the things when I first started doing when I got there was, I speak to her, and I'd say, "Habla español, Miss Joyce," trying to impress her with my limited knowledge of Spanish, hoping to get some sort of reaction. And every time I saw her, I would say, "Habla español, Miss Joyce. Habla español, Miss Joyce." And one day, Miss Joyce started speaking in Spanish, and she looked up at me as if she wanted a response. Totally blew me away. At first I was blown away that, after, continuing to do that, she finally gave me what I was asking for. And then I was embarrassed because I didn't know anything but habla español, Miss Joyce. So now when her family comes in and her friends come in, I'm able to share that story with them. They tear up. And again, it's not a start to finish story, but it's something that they're able to see. That we are making an effort to engage the thing that meant most to her, and that was Spanish. Yeah. And the fact that we're able to get that out of her. And every time they come in now, they say, "Did she speak any Spanish today? Did she speak any Spanish today?" And I'm crossing my fingers like, "Oh my God, I hope not," because unless it's habla español, I'm in trouble.
Well, just tell her que pasa, right? Exactly. I think that's how she's doing that particular day. No, that's really heartwarming, and looking at some of your company philosophy. And, when I ran across this slogan, they took care of us, now let's take care of them. I think that really speaks to, to senior living, to the industry and what we all want to do in the healthcare field. Sure. To really extend that appreciation for what they've all done for us. And, those kind of stories are important because, sometimes people will come into, some of your facilities reluctantly.
Sure, absolutely.
They may not have wanted to come in at that time, but the family had a need and they had some extra medical situation that just didn't allow them to stay, in their prior residence. Right. So it's really good to hear those kind of stories. And I know in particular some of what we're doing, any particular events that you've done, like for veterans, and so many of the residents are of that World War II generation.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that we do, Stephen himself, which is a phenomenal person, but Stephen comes out. He's available to any of our communities, and he'll come out and do actually talks on veterans or any specific holiday, but especially veterans. And he's kind of an academic or history buff. But he'll come out and his talks are, again, they're not educational, but they are to stimulate long-term memory. So he'll do talks on World War II or the Korean War, or talks about Hitler and things that were really relevant when our seniors were much younger and their memories were more vibrant. But, the reaction you get from someone who, again, can't tell you what they had for breakfast is astounding. You see how they'll begin to actually have conversations, and engage him in his talks, because everything he's talking to him about is geared towards something that they've actually been through or something that was relevant in their life. So we're really big, all of our communities, in celebrating our veterans. No,
that's phenomenal. And I know attending some of the ceremonies that we've been involved with, we've had individuals get up and tell stories in great detail of things that 60, 70 years ago that are just very inspiring. And then others are inspired to get up and talk about their experience because of, the service given by that generation. So it's great to say in your facilities that you have that focus on honoring our veteran group. So with that, in terms of your facilities, in general, how do you go about trying to attract seniors into your facilities? What do you do in terms of promotion and community involvement and marketing?
Yeah, the biggest part is community involvement. We don't do a lot in the wake of advertising. We think word of mouth is really the best advertisement. And most people want, a shiny new car at some point in their life. So the aesthetics of the community, it's fine, but, there's going to be a lot of nice places to live. But we really think it's the programming. So really educating people, whether it's physicians, nurse practitioners, but just really educating the public at large as to what we really offer. Everybody doesn't need to be in a nursing home. Folks can still enjoy quality of life despite, their cognitive impairment. And so for us, it's really, out and about, we kind of boots on the ground, educating folks to what lengths of service we actually can provide in a warm, home-like environment.
Terrific. And I think, why don't you let the listeners know what your website is? Because, again, your facilities are located, across the country. I believe almost entirely on the East Coast, but you've got
Right.
facilities from New York to Georgia. So tell the folks what your website is, and maybe
Right.
spell it out for them.
Okay, our parent company is Peregrine, www.peregrine, peregrineseniorliving.com, and our specific location is www.peregrineemory.com, peregrineemory.com.
Terrific. And I know, again, you've got so much experience in the company. I believe you also actually help to train in other areas caregivers that work in facilities outside of yours. So that's a credit to your management.
Absolutely. We're really committed to the seniors at large, and not just to folks who live in Peregrine communities.
Okay, terrific. Anything else that you feel really sets your sites apart?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our fundamental principles is deepening the spiritual experience. It's not something that's politically correct, not something that a lot of people will tackle. I think that hands down sets us apart. We believe a healthy spiritual life is fundamental to a healthy aging process. So in all of our communities, we have a chapel. In all of our communities, we have a chaplain on site who they are equipped to do denominational and non-denominational services, so that this focus, we think, gives our residents a sense of peace and connection. So when they are having moments of agitation or aggravation, some folks who don't know who President Barack Obama is can still recite the 23rd Psalm. And so the fact that we have that on site, for them to make that connection and help through some difficult times in their life, I think absolutely, hands down, sets us apart from other people.
That's terrific. And I'm assuming, because I've seen some of the vehicles, that you also work to help the residents get off site so that they can kind of be back in the community, whether it's bringing the bus over to Publix to take them shopping or other things.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our premier things that we do is actually Meals on Wheels. And for folks in memory care, to actually go out to sites to prepare meals and then deliver them to folks who are less fortunate than them is absolutely phenomenal. But that's one of the things our residents absolutely love getting out to do, Meals on Wheels.
That's phenomenal. We're actually going to go to a break here, and when we get back, we're going to talk about selecting senior housing, talking about funding, and talking a little bit further about dementia and some of the strategies that you use to help your residents.
All right,
so
fantastic.
We will be right back.
Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey.
Welcome back to Better Living. This is Marty Benson, again sitting in for Jeannie Pete. Definitely tough shoes to fill. Jeannie does a great job, and we'll be back for our next show. I want to thank Kelly for helping us out today. Kelly, you got anything to say to our audience?
Hi guys, it's me, Kelly, Jeannie's assistant. I'm here making sure that everything's going okay, and Marty's doing a great job.
You tell my boss Melly that when you see her. So again, we're joined by Wayman Parks from Peregrine's Landing at Emory Heights, and we've had a great conversation so far talking about senior housing and the Peregrine philosophy, and just to recap it, the three principles that we talked about in particular were, focusing on their senior residents in terms of understanding that if they do have dementia, that the short-term memory may be impacted, but we can really bring out, the long-term memories and the personality and the types of people that they are by seeking those long-term memories, treating the family and not just focus strictly on the resident, but involving the family in the plan of care, involving them in improving the quality of life for the resident. And then finally, the investment in the training program for the staff that they have. And we're going to talk a little further about that, really some neat things that they're doing in terms of training and technology and really creating empathy, which is what we need for in the senior housing environment. So welcome back, Wayman. Why don't you let the people know how to reach you, and again, let us know what the website is for Peregrines.
Okay. We actually have 3 communities in Georgia, one in Decatur, Vinings, and Holcomb Bridge as well. Our community is Peregrines Landing at Emory Heights. The website is www.peregrineemory.com, peregrineemory.com. Our phone number is 404-299-6600.
Terrific. And Wayman, a lot of what we talked about in the first segment in terms of this term institutionalism, which is not one that people have sort of a positive view about because of how things used to be in terms of people that had declining health and had to go, strictly, right into a long-term care facility versus something that more resembled what I'll call homes. So let's talk a little bit about what's happened in particular in Georgia with the Aging in Place initiative. Can you sort of explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, right now what's happening in Georgia is the state has kind of reassessed the licensure process where most assisted livings for since forever have been licensed as a personal care home, because initially when this kind of got started, a personal care home was considered to be basically a house that had 3 or 4 bedrooms or maybe 2 bathrooms. And now you have, communities that have anywhere from 60 to 130 apartments, where people can actually live, and that didn't meet, kind of the fire code, the regulations. You had people who had progressed to maybe where they were in wheelchairs, living on the 4th floor or 6th floor, of an assisted living community, and actually it was a fire hazard, and the concern was, how do people get out and evacuate in the event of an emergency, because this is not a 2 or 3 bedroom house. So the state has kind of mandate that, assisted living communities and memory care communities need to have a different license, because they need to be able to provide proof that the folks can be evacuated in a timely manner in the event of an emergency or a disaster. So, the license has been a big issue across the state. A lot of companies have jumped right on that to make sure that they're in compliance, and those who haven't are now still considered a personal care home. I think the biggest caveat to that is that folks need to be aware of, if you're considering moving your loved one into a place that's surely nice and provides good service, but is a personal care home, the issue that you're going to run into is that they won't be able to, per the state, provide service to end of life. Because once your loved one progresses to where they're no longer walking or need assistance in transferring and that sort of thing, then you're going to have to do this process all over again.
Okay. And who sort of, Wayman, ends up making that decision and that determination at the time where, a resident that it would be in, say, a personal care home situation where they would have to do that transition to a skilled nursing facility?
Yeah, typically, the state does, their checks that they do on a regular and consistent basis, and that's usually where it may be discovered that, there's 2 or 3 folks here that cannot evacuate, and there's not appropriate staffing to help them evacuate in the event of an emergency. So again, at that point, the state is going to send out a notification to that particular facility saying these folks have to move, pretty much.
Okay.
And give them a deadline to do it.
Okay. So is it fair to say then, for the understanding of our listeners, that there's maybe more licensed now what are called personal care homes versus assisted living facilities?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's just a distinct difference now where, once you make the decision to make this move, and God knows it's difficult enough as it is, you just want to be sure that you're moving to a place where you don't have to do this process all over again, that your loved one can actually age in place and have all their needs met there, until such time as, as they're no longer with us.
Right, absolutely, and so, for that situation, there's many good living environments, from your smaller facilities that might be 5 or 6 rooms, all the way on up to assisted living facilities that could be 100 or 200 rooms. A lot of different options. So let's talk a little bit about, for the benefit of our listeners, what do you look for as you start this search process? And you have a loved one that needs to go into some type of senior living. Help us outline sort of a checklist of things that they should be looking for.
Yeah. Today's consumer is just a lot more educated than they have been in the past, and there's just a number of resources. Almost every company actually provides resources for folks to even just via their websites to be able to look and say, these are some things you should look for. But I think first and foremost, folks should actually go and visit places you are considering. It's one thing to have a testimonial, it's one thing to love a website, but I think to actually go unscheduled, of course, just to pop by on a Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, even a Sunday evening, just to pop by, see what's going on when nobody's watching and when nobody's planned to expect your visit. And I think that's going to give you the best, firsthand, kind of review of what happens on a day-to-day basis, and whether it's a meal time to see what's happening when folks eat. Is the food really as good as people say it is? What kind of portions they're serving, or even to the activities. Popping in the middle of the day just to see what's going on. Or your loved ones sitting in front of a TV? Are they really being engaged? So I think first and foremost, folks, go see at least 3 or 4 places. Really go see these places, really get to know the staff, talk to the people who run the place, know the philosophy of the company, who owns a place, who runs a place, and what they stand for. And I think that's the best first step.
Okay, terrific. And I like how you said kind of unannounced, because then you sort of, just like with anything, you sort of get the real world scenario. So, yeah, I think with that, evaluating the activities, looking at, what are the meal plans like? Obviously, that's important. Good nutrition, activities. Having some way to still allow residents that are not real mobile to be able to go out into the community. I think is important. And then obviously, ultimately, depending on what the medical needs are for the resident, what kind of medical oversight, what type of partnerships, just the way we're partnered as companies, can be brought into bear. That's going to really make quality of life better for the residents.
Absolutely. I think that's huge. And I think it says a lot about, individual communities who they partner with, to be quite honest. I think looking at care plans to know, how this community has outlined how they're going to care for your loved one. Be involved in the care plan. Know that when the nurse does her assessment and she gets the physician's report from the doctor, what group of people in that community sit down and say, this is how we're going to meet your loved one needs on a day-to-day basis. If those needs exceed our capability or scope of what we're able to do we have community partners that can come in so that you don't have to initially, think of moving again? Is there a hospice company that doesn't just represent end of life, but can provide supportive services like Homestead, come in and provide supportive services that help us keep the loved one and now their residents and still make sure that they're getting the proper support that they need based on where they are in their life.
Absolutely. So families have the right to sort of share in what we call the care plan, which really is going to outline the goals and the situation that particular resident finds themselves in. So it's great that you take active involvement, updating the families, encouraging the families to be involved. And, we talked about personal experiences in the first segment. I think for me, it's been a couple in going into senior facilities. In terms of activities, one of the things that we had brought into a facility was a gentleman that did Tai Chi, and they talked about how excited the residents were, looking forward to this particular activity, and how in a period of months, someone that was sort of maybe down, depressed, not real physically active, really sort of transformed. And then, on a weekly, bi-weekly basis was so looking forward to this activity that just changed their whole outlook. So really, with your facility, are there certain activities that sort of trigger that, the ones that are so popular that they really sort of change.
Absolutely. And honestly, partnering with folks who can also provide that, because let's face it, none of us have the answer to everything. We're all just kind of figuring it out. Stephen loves to say, hey, we're figuring it out as we go along. We didn't have a name for these diseases until 1902. So as we figure it out, being able to partner with folks who, again, have someone who come in and do Tai Chi or come in and do virtual dementia, these activities, anything with music, any type of musical activity where there's someone playing an instrument or singing, is such a part of our heritage and our culture. Just as human beings, music plays such a big part of our lives that when folks come in and they sing these songs and perform them from the 30s and 40s and 50s and some good old Johnny Cash, it just gets everybody in a good mood. People are smiling, people are tap dancing. Residents who are comfortable in wheelchairs, they want to get up and dance a little bit. So it's anything that's music oriented is probably one of the most successful activities that happen in our communities.
Excellent. So another issue that we wanted to talk about that's sort of related to, a checklist of finding the right senior housing is really talking about the funding issue, because I do think there's some misunderstanding out there among our listeners in terms of how do we go about paying for senior housing. Can you walk us through that? Yeah,
sure. The biggest misconception that most people have is that folks typically think that Medicaid is going to pay for it. And quite frankly, Medicaid is not going to help pay for it, because when assisted living was first introduced in the United States, probably some 35, 40 years ago now, there were no assisted livings. There were only nursing homes. And so states reimbursed for nursing homes because that was the only option available. When assisted living came on the scene, states kind of looked at it and said it's a luxury, not a necessity. These places, they look like houses, they look like homes, and it kind of went away from the institutional model of, the basic things keeping folks, clean, safe, and well fed. So Medicaid, the states never allowed Medicaid to reimburse for assisted living because they just felt like it was a luxury and not a necessity. So Medicaid typically will only reimburse in this type of setting for a skilled facility, which is basically a nursing home. So there are other ways to fund it. VA, Veterans Aid and Attendance Benefit. So whether you're a veteran or a spouse of a veteran, as long as the loved one or their spouse has done active wartime, then they are eligible for benefits that will help assist with the cost, and long-term care insurance. There's so many seniors who have insurance policies that their adult children were not aware they have a long-term provision in those policies, and long-term care will absolutely reimburse based on the policy you took out for assisted living. So those are just a couple of options that are really viable, that people are not aware of, that they certainly can take advantage of. And most communities that you're interested in will be more than happy to help you explore those options and help you get to the core of where those funds are.
That's great. So, and that was the next question I was going to ask you then, is that you, with your expertise and your staff, you can kind of help people walk through these options that are available, for funding.
Yeah, we're more than welcome to sit down with families, provide other resources. We just think that this is something that families don't need to take on by themselves. It's too overwhelming, and quite frankly, nobody understands it.
Right.
So what we do as being the experts in the field is we lend our knowledge, and then we bring in community partners that can actually walk a person through the process of getting these benefits to where they're actively helping pay the cost of assisted living.
No, and that's all good information. And again, I wanted to emphasize that also relates to Medicare and Medicaid.
It does.
Not funding or paying for assisted living or personal care home funding. So again, we'll work with individual families on that issue. Speaking of families, as I think about your communities and senior living in general, with so many families kind of split up across the country now and even across the world, what are some of the things that you do in your community to try to keep people together and engaged?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because again, folks are, and one of the things we actually do is we do Skype. We do Skype in our communities. A lot of times, even for folks with some sort of cognitive impairment, the interaction is not as much about the verbalization as it is just being able to see the loved one, being able to see their apartment, being able to see them participate in activities. We actually, in our communities now, we have smart TVs to where we're actually able to stream live some events that are happening in our communities to our family members, so they're actually able to see things in real time while they're actually happening. The other thing that we have is called Simply See, where folks can kind of upload, photos as, maybe if someone's cleaning out their attic and they find a photo of their dad, when he was a young man or something like that, and they're able to upload those things, and then the residents are able to see them even in their apartment or share them in the community. So we're really taking advantage of the technology. The streaming live, I think folks are really loving, because that's such a hot thing now that we're able to do. And so for someone who lives out of state to see their mom actually, participate in Meals on Wheels or cuddling the pig or something like that, to see that live and know, wow, this is what's happening is pretty remarkable.
No, that's phenomenal. I wasn't even aware that you did that, but I mean,
Yeah.
people are taking advantage of technologies these days, and whether it's Skype or FaceTime and some of these
Absolutely.
other applications. Anything else in the technology area that you see impacting, your residents and families? I noticed that you have, electronic medical records. So does that make things easier in terms of sharing information?
Absolutely. As technology continues to grow, we're able to, with doctors, as opposed to a doctor having to come on site, to know, what were the results of the wellness check. And the wellness check could be, the height, the blood pressure, the weight, to monitor those things on a regular basis, as opposed to the doctor coming or sending the nurse practitioner out. We're able to electronically send that information to the doctor, and the doctor is able to see, notice some changes that he's concerned about or not concerned about. But it's a way for us to send regularly scheduled updates to physicians and other healthcare professionals, back and forth, that expedite time that is typically wasted in having to wait for a visit to come out. So it just helps us be proactive. Yeah.
No, that's terrific, and that might be another thing to add to the checklist for, families and potential residents that are looking at options. Is, what is their particular community doing, with regards to technology? Given that, in the coming years we probably will continue to have a shortage
Absolutely.
of primary care physicians. So
Yeah.
we will do more with working with our nurse practitioners, but some of this might be done remotely.
Sure.
And I think even the state of Georgia is behind some initiatives for what's called either telemedicine or telehealth, depending on how you want to define that. I could envision a room within one of your facilities where, a resident is sitting and being examined remotely by a physician that could be somewhere else and anywhere, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Those days are vastly approaching us. So
you see more of that coming down the line. then.
Absolutely. Because again, sometimes folks come to us, they don't have a primary care physician because, quite frankly, that person that they used to go see is just not around anymore. So,
Right.
it's important that we have physicians, that cater to our residents, know our communities, know our philosophies. We have a relationship with them. And again, sometimes they just can't get out as often as they like to. So as efficiently and quickly as we're able to communicate information back and forth, and sometimes it's just not, a voicemail or fax just doesn't cut it. So if there's any type of way or program that we can, that electronically will just send generic or regular updates, then that makes it better for our residents.
Okay, terrific. In our first segment, you talked a little bit about, the fact that with the principles that you follow, that you're very much supportive of residents and their path to individual growth. That just because they're not working, they're maybe not as active, doesn't mean that they can't have personal development. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that really means a lot to me personally. One of our fundamental principles is renewal of individual growth, and it's so innovative when you think of folks with cognitive impairment. That's just something people don't generally associate with those residents at this point in their life. So for us, it's physically and intellectually. So physically, it may be just walking 100 feet, but it's not just walking 100 feet. It's if we have a resident who's in a wheelchair, maybe they've had a fall, they're timid about walking, or they just, quite frankly, have gotten comfortable in a wheelchair, don't like to be as active as they used to be. If we can take walking from one end of the hall to the other, make it an activity. It's something that we do every Tuesday and Thursday, and we have 4 or 5 staff members who are around, cheering them on and motivating them, and it becomes something that we celebrate. as opposed to a chore, then it becomes something that the resident looks forward to. It becomes something that we can build on. So now we have someone who families always see in a wheelchair who now are walking, from one hall to the next hall because we've made it something that they can celebrate, something we can build a memory around. And intellectually, which is really astounding for folks who have, various types of dementias, for families to come in and see their loved one finishing the words to a poem, or singing verses to a song, because again, we've made this something to celebrate. We've made this something that's an achievement. Then it's really something that's pretty mind blowing.
No, that's phenomenal. And when we talked about the care plan a little while ago, we can celebrate these small successes, and we
Absolutely.
can share those with the family, even remotely, from what you just explained a couple minutes ago. So I like that philosophy that you never stop pursuing personal growth.
Absolutely.
And in terms of the activities we talked about and the quality of life, you seem to have all that in place as well. Anything else in terms of the that you're doing in personal growth, individual growth, quality of life things that might be helpful to know about?
Yeah, I just think that we're innovative. We don't want to be what people typically see. We don't want to be status quo. I think Stephen is very, very open. It's absolutely unbelievable. He's open to from caregivers sending him emails and sending him phone calls. He's so willing to embrace what somebody else has found to be a success on a day-to-day basis and institute it company-wide, because if you found success in it, then why can't we do it in New York, or why can't we do it in Baltimore? And so those things we're very open to share and very open to, continue to educate our staff and ourselves on what might work to help our seniors.
Yeah. No, that's tremendous. Are there any other resources, for our listeners to look at? Any national organizations that you may be involved with? Any other websites or information that you would like to direct people to as we start to close out today?
Yeah, I definitely think the National Alzheimer's Foundation, the Alzheimer's Association. Those are just great websites. Alzheimer'sAssociation.com. You can go, and they have a variety of resources that you can get just kind of from a one-stop shop.
Okay, terrific. And you have a national organization, I believe, Alpha, which is a group that
We do.
is a national organization for assisted living industry. Well, Wayman, I really appreciate you coming out today and spending this time with us. Do you want to give us your number in case people want to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in the great city of Decatur and surrounding areas, 404-299-6600.
Terrific. Well, feel free to contact Wayman if you want to learn more about Peregrine's Landing, whether it's Emory Heights or the organization. And I just want to close out and kind of steal their philosophy today, because I love the statement in terms of our seniors. They took care of us. Now let's take care of them. And we really appreciate our listeners. Thanks for tuning in today. Jeannie will be back for our next show, Better Living, sponsored by the Homestead Hope Foundation. Thank you.
I'm Jeannie Pete. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day and week ahead, and listen here same time next week and every week. Homestead Hope Foundation is your resource for a healthy life. God bless.